Okay, we will start our presentation now. Thank you everybody for joining our webinar on the use of server-side ad insertion in 2020. If you're not familiar, Pixalate recently received some accreditation from the Media Rating Council for SSAI measurement metrics. And the measurement metrics are particularly important for connected TV and OTT advertising, which is where we will focus today. If you have any questions for Chris, our expert today, feel free to submit them in the questions window on GoToWebinar. If we have time to answer some of the questions at the end of the presentation, we will do so. But if we don't have the time, we do plan on answering questions in a follow-up blog post in the coming weeks, where we hope to answer all of your questions in more detail. So please feel free to submit your questions using that window. We will definitely see them and address them in our blog. I am Tyler Lochner. I'm on the marketing team at Pixalate. I'm really just your moderator today, though. The real expert is Chris Schwartz, our product manager at Pixalate. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself and giving a quick background?
Of course. So I'm Chris Schwartz. I'm a product manager here at Pixalate. I've been with Pixalate just about 2 years now. As for my background, I have 5 years experience working for Ernst & Young, specifically out of the media and entertainment group based out of Tampa, Florida, which are responsible for many of the audits conducted on behalf of the Media Rating Council. So I'm excited to join you guys today.
Perfect. Yeah, Chris is our resident MRC expert, so definitely a great person to learn from about all of the new accreditations that we've received. If you're not familiar with Pixalate, we'll just do a quick overview. We are a global ad fraud, intelligence, and marketing compliance platform. We have offices worldwide with headquarters in Palo Alto, California. Our products all revolve around sophisticated fraud solutions and measurement and insights. Our key products are a fraud monitoring platform and analytics platform, which provide insights across all devices, desktop, mobile web, mobile app, and connected TV. We also have several pre-bid block lists to help you stop fraud before it reaches the bid stream, including several pre-bid block lists that are dedicated entirely to connected TV and OTT environments. And we also have a supply chain intelligence tool called the Media Ratings Terminal, which provide you with granular insights on apps and domains, including invalid traffic rates, viewability levels, supply sources, lots of information to help when buying or working with specific supply partners. And then we're also constantly educating the marketplace on our blog, which can be found at blog.pixalate.com. Every week we are releasing data-driven insights or reports, timely reports. We recently had some information on how the COVID-19 is impacting both the connected TV supply chain and the mobile app supply chain. We're actually expecting another report coming up in the next couple of weeks. So be sure to sign up for our blog, and you can stay in the know on the latest discoveries that Pixalate is coming across. Now, Chris, as we know, the OTT and CTV ad landscape has gone through a lot of changes in the last 12 to 24 months, highlighted by the fact that there is just way more supply right now. We've seen, based on Pixalate's data, we've seen 232% more OTT apps now support programmatic advertising. And the spend on those apps has actually increased even more. In the last 12 months, we've seen a 330% rise in the number of programmatic OTT or CTV ads. This comes across nearly 24 OTT app stores, over 30,000 apps now. We're monitoring over 300 million OTT devices. But where today's conversation will primarily be focused is around server-side ad insertion, which if you look at those numbers on the right side, it's a very, very big part, and it's also a big risk to connected TV advertising. So Chris, can you jump into those numbers just a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'd like to preface that with as well is that this is data based on our last OTT CTV report. We expect these numbers to increase substantially, especially in light of the steps taken to mitigate COVID-19 and with a lot of the expected rise in connected TV and OTT overall viewership. But as far as SSAI is concerned, based on our last report, we're seeing 40% of that inventory in OTT and CTV channels being delivered via SSAI integrations. And of that, we're seeing an average IVT rate of 28%. Now, one caveat I do want to put on that is that Pixalate's IVT rate is based predominantly of open auction programmatic traffic sources. However, this is expected to rise in the future, especially given the shift of ad fraudsters towards OTT and CTV channels. But we'll get into some of the exploits that SSAI allows a little bit later.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we're using a lot of acronyms, which is the ad tech industry's favorite thing is to make acronyms. But Chris, can you explain what are we talking about when we say OTT and CTV? Because I know to some people that can mean slightly different things. And then also server-side ad insertion, or SSAI.
Yeah, so I think it's very important that we make the clear distinction that when we're speaking on OTT and CTV throughout this presentation especially, we're speaking about this as being defined on a device level, essentially where the inventory is accessed by the end user. So in the case of OTT or CTV, this would be expected to be an internet-enabled TV, be it a Samsung Smart TV or an over-the-top device such as your Roku's, Amazon Fire, Chromecast, etc.
Great. And then can you briefly explain server-side ad insertion?
Oh, absolutely. So SSAI, I think it's important that we simplify it in the context of the discussion today. At a high level, it's where the delivery of the ad content and the video content is delivered via one stream. Typically, when this occurs, it's being delivered by what we refer to as a server proxy IP. So in those instances, those are being delivered from the server side, and we're going to go into some detail as to what impacts that has on reporting.
Great. Now, as we know, server-side ad insertion is very commonplace. 40% of programmatic transactions are delivered via SSAI, but there are also some risk factors with SSAI and the connected TV OTT landscape in general, not just when server-side ad insertion is used. For example, Pixalate has uncovered, so far in 2020, we've uncovered 2 different OTT fraud schemes. They had different characteristics. There were some similarities. These were called Monarch and DiCaprio. You can read more about them on our blog. But what these go to show is that the OTT and CTV landscape is not, it's not something that is going to become under attack later this year or in future years. It's something that fraudsters are actively scamming buyers and sellers on right now. Chris, can you, if the people listening right now want to learn more about these, they can read about them on BuzzFeed or Adweek or Pixalate's blog, but can you maybe just go over some of the key points? What are some of the key things to know about in terms of ad fraud that's happening right now in this environment?
Yeah, let me preface this, the specifics by saying Pixalate is obviously uncovering SIVT schemes, if you will, each and every day within OTT and CTV environments. That said, these publications should really serve to disprove the misnomer that's out there in many different parties that OTT and CTV is essentially immune from ad fraud. That is not the case, as can be evidenced by these schemes in and of themselves. That said, in these particular cases, what we were seeing in terms of the MRC guidelines that were breached are that we saw spoofing occurring, whether that be manipulation of OTT CTV inventory that's really being delivered that really is not OTT and CTV inventory and is in fact mobile app inventory. But in those cases, we're also seeing falsified measurement events as well. And we're seeing these spanning beyond OTT and CTV into mobile in-app. And we're also seeing that this is impacting major brands across the spectrum. So I think that's another major point to make, is that these are premium brands are often targeted by fraudsters, especially in these very high CPM environments, because there is so much money to be made. And one of the ways they're doing that also is through the exploitation of SSAI, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, now that's a big one. Is there are lots of risk factors, but perhaps the biggest risk factor is server-side ad insertion. It impacts reporting in a variety of ways, but I think one of the best ways to put it is the way that this Adweek article had it last year. This was written by Ronan Shields. He wrote that, ironically, server-side ad insertion, which was a technical advancement designed to improve the public's viewing experience, inadvertently let fraudsters cover their tracks. And Chris, what I'm really looking for an explanation on, and I know a lot of people in this industry are looking for as well, is how does server-side ad insertion inadvertently let fraudsters cover their tracks? What is it about the use of SSAI that is so different from a traditional reporting experience? And what are some of the pitfalls that come with that, or some of the red flags that advertisers might need to look out for?
Absolutely. So one thing to note is that overarchingly, SSAI is a good thing for not only the end user, but also oftentimes many advertisers, in the sense that by delivering ad content along with the video content in a single stream, this is designed to prevent disruptions or interruptions that occur on the end user's device. Meaning you wouldn't expect for your ad content to be interrupted midway through interacting with it. That said, it's also important to know that by doing so, this opens up other benefits in the sense of ad blocking being able to be circumvented. So when both are delivered, both ad content and video content are delivered via a single stream, then the expectation is that in very few cases are you going to be able to separately block the ad content as opposed to the video content. However, when you're doing this and leveraging SSAI integrations, which there are many different types and different companies that are actively involved in SSAI, whether it be one of your larger groups, your AWS, larger content delivery networks such as Akamai, or even on a publisher level, just a custom in-house integration. With SSAI, because the IP address being passed without anything else in play is ultimately that of the proxy server, it provides very little insight into the end user device. So what's needed to facilitate that is those various frameworks that the IAB has brought forward to allow for header values to be passed, such as X forwarded for XFF, or subsequently the X device user agent headers, such as X device IP, etc. Now, what Pixalate has done is we have termed SSAI, which also allows for, or also passes the additional headers, such as the X device IP, to be coined as transparent SSAI, meaning essentially everything has gone out of its way to identify itself as SSAI, give insights into the IP address of the end user device. However, what's important to note here in terms of exploitation is that with SSAI, essentially all header values can be entirely falsified. That said, also another point to make is that when services take a holistic whitelist approach, whereby they say IP addresses associated to what we think to be a proxy server for SSAI are entirely considered valid transactions. That's a difficult, that approach is not necessarily appropriate, given that by doing so, fraudsters can then easily exploit those same IP addresses for their own monetary gain. And then another point to raise is that from a outright reporting perspective, one thing that SSAI has made difficult to date is determining whether or not the measurement event itself, for example, an impression, is being fired at a server-side level or at a client-side level. Obviously, with the client-side measurement event, you're getting a lot more insight into the ad having actually been delivered and fired from the end user's device, whereas if it is measured and recorded from the server side, then there's little insight that has occurred.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. By the way, everybody, this is being recorded, and a recording will be available, so you can listen again and really try to get a better understanding of how this impacts reporting. But as you can tell, this is really a unique challenge with server-side ad insertion being so prevalent in OTT and actually being so important. It genuinely does improve the viewing experience, and in some cases is necessary. But as Chris noted, there really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to it. You can't blacklist it. You can't entirely whitelist it. You really need a sophisticated solution to measure server-side ad insertion. But there are lots of benefits once a solution like that is in place. There are lots of benefits to the marketplace of being able to measure server-side ad insertion. Chris, if you can explain what some of those benefits are to our attendees, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's very important to note the level of transparency that is offered through SSAI measurement metrics and overall automated SSAI measurement and detection. One of the big points there, I think, kind of needs to go back to the history of Pixalate. Pixalate, ultimately 7-8 years ago, was really founded around the premise of finding a lot of the data center and proxy traffic where invalid traffic was very rampant. That has evolved, and over the last 3 or 4 years has been developed into an SSAI proxy reputation service, whereby essentially not only is the individual IP address being evaluated, but also the overall proxy responsible for doing such activity is also evaluated. And then within that, it's very important to really shine a light on the amount of traffic that is either SSAI and completely invalid, or is representing itself as SSAI, but is not SSAI whatsoever. So I think that's one of the areas that really allows or has provided benefits to the industry in terms of these metrics. There are 12 unique metrics. As I mentioned earlier, these are reported at a tracked ads level, and we also report on the transparent, or the metrics we coined transparent SSAI. And I think that also provides additional insights into essentially where in the industry, or in the supply chain rather, there may be additional best practices that can be followed, which will really not only one, help appropriately deem certain activity as SSAI, but also protect it from being validated or invalidated incorrectly or correctly, or incorrectly, sorry. In terms of how this works into fraud, really this approach that Pixalate has taken is not a one-size-fits-all. So many services approach SSAI from a all-in or all-out point of view. Essentially, either all of it is proxy invalid traffic because it's being delivered via proxy, or all of it is good because it is SSAI. Obviously, that's not the case. And without an automated means of detecting and reporting on this in real time, there really isn't a holistic solution at the moment based on what's available in the industry. That said, obviously, IAB Tech Lab, IAB, MRC are all working towards additional guidance and integrations, which would allow for this to be much more readily and easily identifiable and reported on. But that's not where we're at the current moment.
Yeah, and it's definitely a best practice to follow those latest guidelines from IAB Tech Lab, MRC, these other organizations that are working towards improving transparency and working around server-side ad insertion. Now, another very big benefit of having the ability to measure server-side ad insertion across a dozen different metrics is just the market intelligence that is now available to buyers and sellers. They really have deeper insight into the supply chain, and it can provide a lot more confidence when buying server-side ad insertion. Here's just an example of a Pixalate dashboard showing some of the things that are now available on a server-side. When server-side ad insertion is used, you can see the device that the end user was watching on and how many ads went to that device, how many of them were server-side ad insertion, when server-side ad insertion was used, how many were transparent, aka how many were following the proper guidelines set forth by IAB, MRC, and other governing bodies. Here's just an example. As Chris noted, we have 12 metrics now. Chris, can you just jump into a little bit? What are those server-side ad insertion metrics, and what are some of the other new accreditations that Pixalate has earned for OTT advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the SSAI measurement metrics, there are currently 12 that have been evaluated by an independent third-party auditor as part of the MRC accreditation process, and I've received MRC accreditation formally as of a couple of months back, or within the month of April, I believe. That said, one thing I did want to also point out, though, is in terms of whitelisting SSAI, the approach taken by Pixalate is that while we work very closely with many vendors in this space responsible for SSAI, we also offer clients and other parties through our clients to submit a whitelisting form for the given SSAI IPs. However, the most important part of this, and this aligns very strongly with the most recent guidance presented in the MRC public comment draft of the IVT guidelines, is that Pixalate, one, does not then one evaluates that traffic after the request has been submitted, and that involves research by the data science team at Pixalate, and also includes a reevaluation on a sporadic basis. That said, even if those IPs are determined to be quote unquote whitelisted, they are still passed through each of Pixalate's IVT filters. They are not just wholly bucketed as valid traffic, as obviously SSAI can still be exploited on the basis of many different SIVT types, and also could even be subject to integration issues, which would be considered GIVT. And then going back to, in terms of the OTT and CTV accreditations, which were recently received in 2020, this includes display tracked ads and impressions for OTT and CTV environments, as well as SIVT detection across display, tracked ads, and impressions.
Yeah.
And then holistically,
go ahead, Chris. You can just explain this.
Yeah. So holistically, just looking at Pixalate's MRC accreditation listing, which is available on our site as well as the MRC's accredited services page. Pixalate maintains SIVT detection and filtration across both display and video ad content. And this is also includes the accreditation for those various SSAI metrics across desktop, mobile web, mobile app, and OTT and CTV environments.
Yeah, great, Chris. And I would also just point out that the server-side ad insertion, while we have focused on connected TV today, those metrics do apply across all devices. We did get a handful of questions from the audience. We actually have a lot of questions. Some of them revolve around XFF headers, which, Chris, I know you touched on how those can still be exploited. The invalid traffic rates in connected TV and OTT. Some questions about the pre-bid block lists, how the metrics are delivered. We have a lot of questions, so I don't think we have time to get into all of them, but we will have a blog post where we answer these questions. So this webinar has been recorded. Thank you guys so much for logging in and joining us and listening to Chris as we kind of explore this new world of connected TV and server-side ad insertion. Be on the lookout for the recording of this webinar so you can watch it again and take in everything Chris said. And we will also, like I said, have a blog recap where we answer your questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining.